Hello, everyone. Still see some folks trickling in, but I think we can get started with the introductions. So welcome to the Infostealer Epidemic, Exposing the Risks to Corporate Security webinar. We're really excited about this one. It actually comes, it's affiliated with a new report we launched about a week ago. We're getting some really great feedback from our customers about the insights. So we're excited to dig in today in a webinar format. So first, let me introduce myself along with our host or our guest of honor, Lynn. So I'm Nicole Canula, and I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at Kella. And hosting today's webinar or leading the content is Lynn Levy. She's a threat intelligence analyst with Kella's CIC research team. A few housekeeping tasks I want to run through. Everyone is muted today, but there will be a Q&A at the end. So please pop any questions into the Q&A on the Zoom menu at any time within the discussion, and we will address them at the end. Next, the webinar is recorded, and we will email you the recording after the webinar, and we'll also include a link to the Infostealer report that I mentioned. And then lastly, if you're having any issues with Zoom, just please pop them into the chat. All right, and one last thing on my end. So if you're not already familiar with Kella and this is your first webinar, we are an intelligence-driven external threat exposure management company. So at the core, we monitor cybercrime undergrounds in the deepest and darkest corners of the web, Telegram channels, forums, and other sources. That, combined with external attack surface management, third-party risk management, and Gen AI security, provides our customers a full view into the risk and exposure to threats, resulting in prioritized and actionable insights. And now I am happy to hand it over to Lynn, who can get us started. So thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Nicole. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we'll start with some basic definitions of corporate credentials, compromised credentials in general, of course, corporate credentials. We'll talk about the evaluation of the selling of those compromised credentials on dark web forums and markets. Then we will dig into the data-driven part of the research, including analysis of 300 real cases of infected employees by infostealing malware. And we'll finish with some recommendations. So let's start with defining the most common motivating threat actors that are conducting cybercrime. So the first is the ideological motivation, which threat actors conducting cybercrime motivated by political or social reasons, which we also call hacktivism. The second is the financial motivation, which is the most frequent one, which is also the motivation that we're going to focus on today, where threat actors are conducting cybercrime in order to gain profit. And the last motivation is strategic, where nation-state-backed threat actors, or most of the time groups, are conducting cybercrime in order to steal sensitive data, to make espionage, or even steal intellectual property. So what are compromised credentials? So those are the combination of information required to access a system or a service, which in other words mean a URL, username required to log in, and a plain text password. So as the example that we can see here, this is a login panel for a VPN of an employee for an example lay organization using the login of the employee's email. So why those corporate compromised credentials are such a hot product out there in the cybercrime economy? So first, those compromised credentials are highly sensitive to market-driven pricing. Much so, if the data, as long as the data is more sensitive and unique, and the same as with the compromised credentials, as long as they're sensitive and unique, they're valued more, right? So let's imagine compromised credentials for a CRM system of a private hospital, including a lot of medical records or of patients. It's a very sensitive information, which will be highly valued in its price. The second business model is that we see specializations inside of the ecosystem, which means that as much as we see initial access brokers, which are threat actors that are selling initial access to corporates, and we see malware creating threat actors specializing in the sale and the creation of malware, we also see more and more threat actors starting to join the business of compromised credentials of corporate selling. And the last business model is that those credentials are treated much as commodity because they have real impact, right? Think about compromised credentials into a CEO of a company's webmail. That can be a very powerful tool in the wrong hands, right? Think about a threat actor spreading a phishing email inside a network of a company sent from the verified email of the CEO. It can be leading to devastated things. So how does threat actors getting those credentials? So just to name a few techniques, by cracking, they can do password spraying, dictionary attacks, and so on. They can use phishing attacks, and of course, they can use any malware type to infect machines widely. So this is the infection method that we're going to focus on today. So what threat actors, how those threat actors that are using the infection, using infostealing malware techniques to gain those corporate compromised credentials are working. So the infected machines stealing the data needs to send it back to the threat actor to use it, right? So each infostealing malware at the end of the day is a piece of code, which is generated a bit differently. And the data that they're stealing varies from one type to another. And the format that they're saving the stolen data also varies. But the one thing that it's the same for all of the infostealing malware bots is that, as we can see here in the two examples, they will always include passwords folder, which can call, as we see here, all passwords txt, and it also can named password txt, but they will contain the same compromised credentials folder. And we will also find always a system folder, including a system about the machine itself. So this is the data types that we're going to focus today. So maybe initially we'll think about the victim of infostealing malware as an innocent individual, which unfortunately in most of the cases, this is true. But let's think about a bot that is coming from an infected machine owned by a threat actor. Those bots can be a highly valued intelligence weapons for CTI companies and investigators. And this is by those sensitive and detailed information can be used to hunt and uncover the real identity behind the personas of those threat actors on those cybercrime forums by using, for example, as we can see here on the left, we can see that this specific infected machine is located in Germany. We also can see the internal IP of the computer. We can even see the city and the username of the computer that can be pivoted and used for OSINT and WebInt investigations. We can also use those sensitive information in order to identify malicious activities. So as we can see here inside the password txt folder coming from a bot, we can see compromised credentials bulk for including a URL used to register the XSS, which is a Russian-speaking, widely active cybercrime forum. And this can show us that this computer is probably used by a person with malicious intents. And lastly, to uncover even criminal networks. At the end, threat actors are working in collaborations and are communicating with each other. And those sensitive leads can be used to uncover those collaborations and even to trace financial transactions. So as for the evaluation of those compromised credentials sales, so how everything started, how the practical selling of those corporate compromised credentials as a standing alone product started, how it looks like. how it looked like. So, for example, as we can see here in this screenshot, threat actor joined the forum, opened write a thread, and listed their, in this case, ULP lists that we will touch just in a few slides. So in this case, the seller is listing 2.3 billion unique rows of compromised credentials and the price of $259. So what's the problem in this case? Again, we're talking about financially motivated threat actors that are probably successfully set up an infrastructure of widely infecting machines and getting each day even thousands of bots of stolen information from their victims, right? So sell them one by one on private sales on forum to wait for customers to join, to comment, and wait for the transformation of the Bitcoin currency that they work with. Takes a lot of time, and it's majorly not scalable. So this where the automated markets join the picture. So as we can see, this is the interface of the Russian market, which is a well-known market for bots selling. And as we can see here, those automated markets allowed from the side of the buyers to filter exactly the product that they're looking for, exactly the type, the profile of the bot coming from infected machines that they're looking for. So for example, they can filter here by the infostealing malware type, about the operating system of the computer, and even the country, and so on. And from the side of the sellers, they got opportunity to present their catalog, let's say, of all of their stolen bots just automatically and see their wallets getting more big and full and fuller. So in parallel, we saw that the evaluation of subscription models were, as we can see here in the example, we see a Telegram subscription channel called Monster Private Logs, offering range of 3,500 to 10,000 bots a day. Again, it can come to 10,000 bots a day, streamed coming to your to the client's device, ready to download and to use. And this service is offered for $650 for a month subscription and $8,000 for a lifetime. And again, we're talking about 10,000 bots, as we mentioned earlier, including a lot of sensitive stolen information from 10,000 different unique machines. So next to the demand for the whole bots that we saw, that including also sensitive compromised credentials and also a lot of additional information about the machine itself, threat actors started to demand specifically only the file of the passwords that we saw earlier, which includes the compromised credentials box, right? This is how it looks from inside. As you can see, again, it includes the URL, the username, and the password in plain text format. So for example, for such a service, we can see here a channel called Private URL Channel, offers a 2-week subscription and $35 and a lifetime access of $300 just for those passwords folders coming from infostealing malwares. So now let's dig into the data-driven part of the research, when we were able to collect 300 real cases of bots related to real employees and to analyze them. So the objective of the research was to identify what's the typical profile of an employee infected by infostealing malware. The major challenge of this research was to locate those compromised credentials inside of those bots related to corporate environments, right? Because we also how a bot looks like. It has no statement in anywhere saying this computer belongs to a chef or this computer belongs to a CEO of a company, right? This is a very manual analyze that is required. So this was the major challenge, to locate those 300 bots of coming from employees' computers. The initial hypothesis was that less technologically oriented roles are more likely to fall victim to infostealers, right? In other words, we can say blame it on the human resources or marketing departments of corporates, because the logic was that those departments are probably less educated to how to securely behave on the internet. So as mentioned, in order to get to the objective of this research, we used 300 real infected machines. Initially, we took a huge amount, almost 5,000 of bots collected by Kela between July 19th to August 19th, 2024. And initially, we filtered out all of the compromised machines that didn't include VPN. We wanted only the bots that included VPN credentials in them, because VPN, it's widely used by corporates. In total, we had more than 100,000 stolen credentials. The numbers are aligned because think about that each computer, each infected machine, each bot includes even thousands of compromised credentials in it. So the parameters that we documented in order to analyze each machine, each employee, were first, of course, the victim's role, the job title of the individual that got infected with infostealing malware. As to do that, we had to standardize the diverse in LinkedIn job descriptions. Today, in the job industry, we can have for one specific job role a lot of versions of job titles on LinkedIn. So we chose a broader department names like project management, which included inside of it project manager, operation team lead, technical project manager, development manager, head of infrastructure, and so on, in order to be able to analyze and check and to see the correlations between the parameters. The second parameter was, of course, the employee's status at the time of compromise, the company's sector and jurisdiction, whether the computer that got infected was shared or non-shared by the owner, and if the computer itself was a work computer or a personal computer. So for the results, the most affected department that we observed in the first place was accounting for 28% of the dataset, followed by consulting with 12.7%, and software development with 10.7%. And we all can look here on the right side of the results and see that the HR and marketing specifically are accounting only for 2% of the results, which only at this already at this point can show us that the hypothesis maybe wasn't that accurate. So a case study, a real case of taken from the data set that we analyzed can be seen here. So as we see, this is a screenshot took from the compromised credentials module of Kela. Here we see a real VPN of a company, of an employee that got infected with infostealing malware. Here is we can see this is their LinkedIn profile description. They're working in this EU-based insurance company for 5 years, and they were also employed there while getting infected with infostealing malware, and their progress developer position. So if we're concluding, this is how it looks like, corporate compromised credentials, and this is how the dataset look like. As for the most affected countries, so the most affected ones were Brazil with 9% of the dataset, followed by India with 6.5%, followed by the United States and Spain, each one with 5% of the dataset. An interesting to highlight point here is that checking into the Kela's all data lake of collected bots from 2024 also showed that India and Brazil are the most affected, which shows us that the dataset chosen is presenting the whole data lake. And just another note, the whole data lake of Kela of bots collected in 2024, accounting for more than 4.4 billion bots. So inside those most affected countries, the most affected roles were in Brazil, consulting, followed by project management, and in India, software development, followed by project management. As for the sectors, so also here, in this case, much like with the job departments, we needed to somehow standardize a lot of versions of sectors and industries that are out there. And the most targeted one was technology, with accounting for 14% of the dataset, followed by IT services with 11%, and manufacturing with 9%. When we say technology and IT services sectors in this specific dataset, it spans in a variety of technology related fields, including software development, IT services, computer and network security, and even financial technology, fintech. And the insight we observed from those results is that roles in tech and IT sectors companies face higher risk due to digital exposure. So we understand that not only education of how to securely behave on the internet is important, also the exposure level to sensitive services is also important. As for the machine type and usage behavior, we observed that most of the dataset were personal computers, accounting for 64.7% of the dataset, and those who were personal and unshared computers were the most frequent, accounting for 35.7% of all the cases. Those showing us that personal computers are more valuable to infostealers due to weaker security in most of the cases and risky behavior, right? Because it's those victims' personal computer, and they're not necessarily taking in calculation all of the risks, and they can allow themselves to act in more risky behavior. And in all of those cases in this dataset, those personal computers also stored corporate credentials, which means that employees using unsecured personal devices also increase the organization's attack surface. So a real incident that will reflect this potentially devastating risk for companies coming from info-stealing malware and compromised credentials is the Snowflake incident that occurred in May 2024. Snowflake is a cloud services company. So initially, there were rumors about a former employee of Snowflake that their demo account that wasn't revoked by Snowflake when they finished working there was compromised and led to expose of more than 160 customers of Snowflake's sensitive data. So later, wide investigation revealed that most of those 160 victims of Snowflake customers, employees, were infected by info-stealing malwares. And then their Snowflake account, which means their super sensitive cloud credentials of their companies, were exposed. So this is, and they also observed that most of those victims, users of Snowflake services, wasn't using multi-factor authenticators. So this showcasing us how, unfortunately, even a single employee's stolen credentials to sensitive, like as much as cloud services, can lead to devastating financial and reputational damage for the entire company. The last thing we checked in this research was the connection and the usage of ransomware groups of valid accounts, of those compromised accounts, in order to gain initial access before they're encrypting their victims' systems and data and demand ransom. So to do so, we focused on Play, Akira, and Reseda, which all of them are highly active ransomware groups that are publicly claiming that they're using valid accounts for gaining initial access to their victim system. So how we do that? how we did that. We took a list of claims of victims of this 3 ransomware victims, and we checked in a time range between 5 to 95 days before the attack, the claim of the attack of the ransomware groups, if we can observe a case of selling a listing on the cybercrime forums and markets of compromised credentials belonging to those victims, to see if there a possibility to prove a usage of valid accounts to conduct ransomware. The conclusion that we came to is that stolen credentials from infostealing malware may be used for ransomware attacks. So a real example that we observed here, as we can see on the right, Play is claiming a Canadian steel manufacturer on April 30, 2024, that they're being a ransomware victim. On the left, we can see a login portal of an employee of the same company, of this Canadian steel manufacturer login page. Their compromised credentials to this VPN account of the company was sold on Telegram channel exactly a month before. So maybe it is connected, maybe it's not. We can't say in 100%, but it's for sure an option. So if we're concluding, first of all, the hypothesis busted. So the human resources and the marketing departments are not the most targeted and affected. Even we can say the opposite. They are the less targeted and affected with infostealing malware. We saw that infostealers enable large-scale credential theft and are widely demanded on the cybercrime forums and markets. The analysis of 300 real machines of employees shows that project management roles with most cases in Brazil and the technological sector, and that stolen credentials can be leveraged for ransomware attacks. As for the recommendations, active defense monitoring of the company's exposure and risks constantly is super important in order to be aware of compromise in any level, and of course for sensitive services that the company is using, because we saw the risk that it's coming from those compromised credentials related to corporate environments in the wrong hands, what it can create. And of course, employee cybersecurity training. We understand that each role has different access and usage of services, varying in their administrations and abilities to change things. And it's better and it's best for companies to educate their employees as possible in custom to their activities and usage of sensitive services, how to be more secure and aware for threats. Of course, strength defense, using multi-factor authenticators. We understand that a strong password is no longer good enough, and that the threat that is coming, the huge threat that it's coming from infostealing malware, it's neutralizing the strength of the passwords, and how multi-factor authenticator is important. And we also saw that in the incident of Snowflake. And the last recommendation is, of course, access management and rights revocation. It's very important constantly for a company to make sure that all of their current employees and also former employees and also users and customers are having access to the rights and the services that they need to have access to. So Kela suggests a wide package of cyber solutions and defense models. So the most important is to exposure management, to constantly make sure that all of the company and all of the services and the credentials of the company are safe. And the most important than that, by constantly manage the exposure, gives the company the ability to act in live and to stop a threat before it's escalating. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was really great. I'm just pulling up, we had just a couple questions come in. All right, let's see. The first one is, can you please detail the process of documenting the victim's details? So for example, job title.
Okay, this is a great question because we also how a bot looks like. It doesn't include any summary or uh, title of who owns the infected machine. So as mentioned, the documentation of those parameters were totally manually documented. We were able to one by one pivot those bots, and we located the LinkedIn profiles of those owners of those victims in order to document their job titles.
Got it. Okay. That should make sense, hopefully. All right, the next one here. Can you please explain how you managed to document whether the PCs were shared or not?
Yes, of course. So we defined share or non-shared computer by pivoting the compromised credentials that were stored on the bot, which means if the most, when I say most, I mean more than 95% of the compromised credentials belong to the same individual. I mean, using the same name and username and passwords, we concluded that this computer is probably not shared. But if we saw that less than 25% of the compromised credentials are a combination of few individuals' names and passwords, we concluded that this computer is probably being shared by more than two individuals.
Got it. Okay. Very good. And then we have another one that just came in. Let's see. I think you know the answer to this one, Lynn, or have some insights. And what are the most common vectors to get infected by an info stealer? Do you have some examples of the most common vectors to get infected?
Of course. So we're speaking about the mirror of the technique used to get those info-stealing malware compromised credentials, right? As we mentioned earlier, we have the first technique to crack, the second to conduct phishing, and the third to infect with any type of info-stealing malware. So from the other side, the most frequent vector to fall victim would be, I think, to fall victim by clicking a very good and sophisticated lure in a wide phishing campaign that were targeted in. Just to mention, these days we see also a lot of sophistication in the phishing campaigns, using more and more sophisticated and costumed content in those phishing emails, how threat actors are using also even AI generated malicious tools in order to conduct more sophisticated and efficient phishing campaigns.
Excellent. Okay, I think that answers that one. And I believe that is it for now, but if anyone has any questions as a follow-up, we're always here to help, especially as you're watching the recording or maybe sharing with colleagues or friends. So that is it from us today. Thank you so much, Lynn, for your time and the great insights.
Thank
Thank
you.
you to all of our attendees who joined us, and keep an eye out for our email, and we will be looking